Queen Lyra stood in the great hall of her palace, surrounded by the high council of her people, the elders. The room was silent, except for the quiet hum of the ancient walls and the soft whisper of the wind outside. Her heart raced, and her mind was filled with 1,000 thoughts. She had ruled her people for many years with strength and wisdom, but today her authority was being challenged. She had always believed that her decisions were her own, but this was different. The council had summoned her to this moment, the moment when she would hear a command unlike any she had ever received before. Queen Lyra, Elder Zarek, spoke, his voice low and steady as he addressed her from his seat at the council table. "It has been decided. You will marry a human." But the words hit her like a slap to the face. She could hardly breathe as she tried to process the meaning behind his statement. Marry a human? The thought seemed absurd, impossible. Her people, the Karen, were a proud and powerful race of aliens. They were fierce warriors, and their society had never known anything like a union with humans, the very beings they had once viewed as weak and insignificant. Yet here she was, hearing that her marriage was no longer a choice, but an order. Her eyes wandered to the faces of the other elders around the room. They were all nodding in agreement, their expressions serious. They had already decided there would be no debate. Her fate had been sealed. Why? Lyra's voice was a whisper, barely audible in the vast room. She tried to keep her composure, but the weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders, threatening. To crush her, Elder Zarek did not hesitate in answering. The human race has proven itself, Queen Lyra. They are not the weaklings we once thought them to be. They have the strength, the resilience, and the will to fight. And they are growing more powerful with each passing day. It is time for us to form an alliance with them. You as our queen must marry one of them. The word stung, but Lyra did not show it. She had always been taught that strength meant control, that showing emotion was a weakness. But deep inside, she felt a sense of dread beginning to grow. She had never been asked to sacrifice so much for the good of her people before. Marrying a human. A creature so different from her own seemed like an impossible demand. Felt like a betrayal of everything she had ever known. "Who is this human?" she asked, her voice steady, though the turmoil inside her was becoming harder to ignore. "His name is Elias," Zarek answered, glancing at the others for confirmation. "He is a soldier, a hero among his people. He led a successful mission against the Zergs when they tried to invade Earth. He is well respected and strong." Lyra frowned. The name was unfamiliar, but the story was well known. Elias had been the leader of a small human force that had defended their planet from a deadly alien invasion. The humans had fought bravely, but she had never imagined that one of them would be standing before her now as her husband. "But why me?" Lyra asked again, her voice tinged with frustration. "Why must I marry him? Surely there are other ways." To form an alliance, Zarek's eyes narrowed. The alliance will be stronger if it is forged through your marriage. The bond between you and this human will send a message to both our people and the humans. It will show unity, strength, and resolve. You, Queen Lyra, are the key to this alliance. And this marriage is the price you must pay. Lyra's heart sank. She had always believed in the power of her people, but now it seemed as though they were placing the fate of their entire civilization in her hands. She was being asked to marry a stranger, a human, not for love, but for duty. Her emotions were a whirlwind, but she pushed them aside, forcing herself to think of her people. She had always put her people first, even when it meant sacrificing her own desires. "Very well," she said, her voice cold and firm. "I will do as the council commands. But I will not be a puppet in this marriage. I will not let my heart be used for political gain." Zarek nodded in approval. "We trust you, Queen Lyra. You are a wise leader, and we have no doubt that you will fulfill your duty. The human will arrive in 3 days. You will meet him then." Council session ended, and the room slowly began to empty. Lyra remained standing, her mind still reeling from the decision that had been forced upon her. Her heart was heavy, but she knew there was no turning back. She had a duty to her people, and she would carry it out no matter the cost. As the last of the elders left, Lyra stood alone in the vast hall, staring out at the stars through the enormous windows. She had always dreamed of a future where her people thrived, but never had she imagined that it would be at the cost of her own happiness. She sighed deeply, her eyes filling with tears. She was about to marry a human, someone she had never met, someone she had no connection to. The thought of it was overwhelming, but in that moment, something shifted. She wiped away the tears that had begun to fall, the first of many she feared would come. She knew that she would be strong, for her people, for the future of her race. She would not let this marriage break her, but as she stared out into the vastness of space, Lyra couldn't help but wonder what the human Elias would be like. Would he be as strong as the stories said? Would he be kind? Would he be cruel? She couldn't know yet, but the meeting was fast approaching. And whatever happened, she would face it with the same strength she had always shown. The days passed quickly, and soon the human Elias would arrive on her world. Lyra was still unsure of what to expect, but she knew one thing for certain. This marriage would change everything. How she couldn't yet say, but she had a feeling deep down that her life was about to take a turn she could never have anticipated. The day finally came when Elias, the human soldier chosen for Queen Lyra, was to arrive. The palace was busy with preparations. Lyra stood in front of a large window, gazing out over the city as workers rushed about, making the grounds ready. For the meeting, she could see the large spaceport in the distance, where ships of all sizes came and went. Today, a ship carrying a human would land there. Lyra couldn't stop her mind from racing. What would he be like? She had heard stories of human warriors, their courage and strength, but she had never met one herself. Her people, the Charon, had always viewed humans as a lesser species, even weak in comparison. But now, the council had decided that the future of her people depended on this alliance. She had to marry this human. Her mind tried to prepare for whatever was to come. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Elder Zarek appeared at her side, his face as serious as ever. "The ship is landing soon," he said, his voice low and steady. "Are you ready?" Lyra took a deep breath and turned to face him. She forced a smile, though inside she still felt a storm of uncertainty. "I will do my duty," she replied, her voice steady. "But I will not pretend to be happy about this. Natural." Zarek nodded. "I understand, but remember, this is for the good of the Charon, for unity, for strength. You will learn to work with this human, as we all must." Lyra nodded, even though she didn't fully believe his words. She had always fought for her people's independence there. Freedom now. It seemed she was being forced to give that up. There was no turning back. The ship's arrival was a sight to behold. Lyra stood at the edge of the landing platform, surrounded by her most trusted advisors as the sleek, silver vessel descended from the sky. The sound of the ship's engines roared through the air, and the dust from the ground kicked up as the ship touched down. The Charon soldiers who had been stationed there quickly moved into position, standing tall and alert, ready for anything. The hatch of the ship opened slowly, and a tall figure emerged. At first, Lyra couldn't make out much, but as the figure stepped into the light, she saw him clearly for the first time. It was unlike anything she had expected. Elias stood before her, dressed in simple but well-made clothes, with short, dark hair and piercing blue eyes. He was taller than most humans, his body strong and muscular, though not overly large. His expression was serious, but there was a calmness to him that Lyra couldn't ignore. He didn't look afraid. In fact, he didn't look like he had any. The idea of the weight of the situation, he looked confident, even though he must have known how strange this whole meeting was. He took a step forward, and Lyra noticed the way he moved, graceful despite his size. He wasn't a typical human warrior like the stories had described. He was something different. "Queen Lyra," Elias said, his voice deep and steady. "It's an honor to meet you." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, as if he knew exactly how heavy the situation was. Yet he was determined to face it with respect and bravery. Lyra was taken aback. She had expected him to bow or offer some formal greeting, but instead, he spoke simply, as though they were old friends. It was a strange feeling, and she wasn't sure how to react. But she forced herself to meet his gaze, standing tall as a queen should. "The honor is mine, human," she replied, her voice cool and regal. "You are here at the will of the council, and I expect you to show the respect due to your queen." Iliasis' eyes softened slightly at her words, but he didn't seem offended. Instead, he nodded in agreement. "I understand, Your Majesty," he said, his tone still respectful. "I will do my best to honor the traditions of your people." Lyra felt a strange warmth at his words, though she quickly pushed it away. He was just a human. He was here for a political reason, nothing more. But as they walked together through the palace grounds, Lyra couldn't help but notice the way Elias interacted with the people around him. Spoke kindly to the servants, his eyes always filled with curiosity but never condescension. He didn't seem to see the Karen as lesser beings, even though they were far more powerful than his own species. His humility was something Lyra had not expected, and it left her with a strange sense of wonder. At the royal dinner that evening, Elias sat beside Lyra. The table was long, filled with the finest foods from every corner of the Charon Empire. Yet, despite the splendor of the meal, Lyra couldn't concentrate on the food or the conversation around her. She kept stealing glances at Elias, trying to understand him. He seemed so different. She expected him to be like the soldier she had heard about, brash, proud, and aggressive. But instead, he was calm, thoughtful, and respectful. As the night wore on, the conversation turned to matters of state. The council and Lyra's advisors discussed alliances, trade routes, and military strategy, all while Elias sat quietly, listening more than speaking. It was clear that he wasn't here to dominate the conversation. He was here to listen, to learn, and to respect their customs. Lyra could feel her heart softening, though she was determined to stay strong. She would not let this human worm his way into her heart, not when the future of her people was at stake, but as the evening came to an end. And Elias stood to leave. He caught her eye once more. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Lyra felt something stir inside her, feeling she could not name, a warmth that made her uncomfortable. "I know this marriage is not what you wanted," Elias said quietly, as the others began to file out of the room, "but I will try my best to make this work, Your Majesty. For you, for your people, and for mine." Lyra couldn't help but be moved by his words. She nodded stiffly, though she still didn't fully understand why she felt this way. She had expected an arrogant warrior, not a man who cared so much about the well-being of her people. As he left the room, Lyra stood alone at the table, her thoughts racing. Could this human really be so different from what she had imagined? Was it possible that there was more to him than just a tool for an alliance? She didn't have the answers yet. But one thing was certain. This marriage was going to be much more complicated than she had ever imagined. The days following Elias's arrival passed in a blur for Queen Lyra. The palace was full of activity as the council prepared for the upcoming marriage. But Lyra found it hard to focus. Every time she tried to turn her attention back to her duties, her mind wandered to the human who had entered her life so suddenly. Elias was everywhere. His words, his actions, the way he held himself. She couldn't stop thinking about how different he was from what she had expected. Humans had always been seen as a lesser species, weak in comparison to the mighty Charon. Yet Elias was nothing like that. He was calm, respectful, and above all humble, showed respect to every person he met, regardless of their rank or status. The way he treated the servants, the soldiers, even the guards there was something about him that made Lyra uneasy. She had never encountered a human who acted with such dignity. It was as if he didn't see her as a queen, but as a person, a fellow being, despite the vast differences between their worlds. But was that enough? Could she trust him? Lyra paced the royal chambers late into the night, her mind heavy with these questions. She could hear the soft hum of the palace around her, the distant sounds of the city beyond the walls. Her people, the Charon, were warriors. They didn't show weakness. They didn't show emotion, yet here she was, feeling something stir inside her that she couldn't explain. What was this strange feeling? Was it pity? Or perhaps curiosity? Or was it something deeper, something more dangerous? She remembered the first time she looked into Ilias's eyes. It was during the dinner, when their gazes met across the table. He had spoken softly to her, his words genuine, but there was something Moran understanding that she had not expected. He had not looked at her as a queen or a symbol of power, but as a person. And that in itself was unsettling in the days that followed. Lyra found herself spending more time with Elias. The council had insisted that they meet regularly to discuss the details of their marriage and the political implications of the alliance. Each meeting left Lyra with more questions than answers. Elias was nothing like the soldiers she had been told about. He wasn't brash or arrogant. He didn't speak of war or violence. Instead, he listened. He asked questions. When he spoke, his voice was always steady and respectful. One afternoon, Lyra and Elias were walking through the palace gardens, a peaceful area that Lyra often visited to clear her mind. The lush green plants were a sharp contrast to the cold stone walls of the palace, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers. Lyra found it comforting. Elias seemed to appreciate it too, though he said little as they walked side by side, Elias said after a long silence. "I've never seen anything like this before. Your world is beautiful." Lyra glanced at him, surprised. It was rare for humans to speak with such appreciation for anything outside of their own world. "I suppose we don't think much of it," Lyra replied. "This place has been here for centuries. It's always been the same." Elias looked thoughtful. "That's the thing, isn't it? The beauty of things of life doesn't lie in how long they've been around. It's in how you see them, how you experience them. It's easy to take things for granted." Lyra's brow furrowed slightly. "Speak like someone who has seen much of the world." Elias smiled faintly. "I've seen enough to know that people are the same everywhere. They struggle, they fight, they love. It's all the same, no matter where you go." Lyra was quiet for a moment, pondering his words. Could it be true? Was there really a common thread between all beings, no matter their race, their origins? She had always believed that her people, the Charon, were unique, that their strength set them apart from all others. But now, with Elias standing beside her, she wasn't so sure. "Why did you agree to this marriage?" Lyra asked, her voice hesitant. She had been meaning to ask him this for days, but she hadn't been able to find the right moment. Now, it seemed like the perfect time. Elias stopped walking and turned to face her. His blue eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, they stood in silence. Lyra could see the sincerity in his gaze, and she waited for him to answer. "I agreed because I believe in what it could mean for our people," Elias said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that we can build something better together. I'm not here to be your enemy, Queen Lyra. I'm here to stand beside you." Lyra felt a strange wave of warmth wash over her. She had expected him to speak of duty, of honor, or even of fear. But instead he spoke of partnership, of something greater than just politics. It was a sentiment that she had never heard from her own people, let alone a human. She took a deep breath, trying to collect her thoughts. "And what if I cannot give you what you want?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "What if this marriage is nothing more than a political contract to you?" Elias shook his head gently. "I don't expect anything from you, Queen Lyra. I'm here to offer something trust. You don't have to be alone in this. You don't have to do this by force." Lyra stared at him, her heart racing. His words made something inside her stir, a part of her that she had buried for so long. She had always known that leadership required sacrifice. She had never imagined that the cost would be her own heart. As they continued their walk, Lyra felt the weight of the decision before her. She was not just a queen now. She was a woman, caught between duty and desire, between tradition and change. Elias was right about one thing: she didn't have to be alone. But could she truly let go of the walls she had built around her heart? Could she trust him, a human, not just as an ally, but as something more? As they reached the edge of the garden, Lyra stopped. She turned to face Elias one last time. "I will do my duty," she said quietly, though her voice trembled slightly. "But I need time to understand this alliance. I need time to understand you." Elias nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I can wait, Your Majesty. Take all the time you need." Lyra looked at him, her heart heavy with the uncertainty of what was to come. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Hope that perhaps, in this strange and unpredictable union, she might find something more than just a political alliance. For the first time, Lyra didn't feel so alone. The days that followed Elias's arrival were filled with an uncomfortable tension. Queen Lyra found herself spending more and more time with him, yet her heart remained conflicted. She had been taught from a young age that emotions were a weakness, that a queen should remain strong and unyielding, always keeping her personal feelings aside for the good of her people. Yet here she was, drawn to a human, a soldier, someone she had once considered beneath her. Elias, for his part, seemed just as determined to build a connection with her. He continued to speak with respect and humility, and his words always seemed genuine. He had taken no advantage of their situation, even when given the opportunity. Instead of acting as though the marriage was his victory, he treated it as a partnership, something that could benefit both of their worlds. It was in these quiet moments together that Lyra began to question everything she had been taught. She had always believed that her people, the Karen, were superior, that their strength set them apart from all other species. But now, as she spent more time with Elias, she saw something different. He had strength, yes, but it was a strength of character. A quiet determination that Lyra had never encountered in her own people. One evening, they found themselves in the palace library, a place Lyra often retreated to when she needed to clear her mind. The room was vast, with shelves lined with ancient texts and scrolls that held the wisdom of her ancestors. The soft glow of the lamps cast long shadows across the marble floor, and the scent of old paper filled the air. Elias had been curious about the Charon history, and Lyra had agreed to share some of it with him. She had expected the human to be uninterested, but to her surprise, he listened intently, asking thoughtful questions as she spoke. "Your people have a rich history," Elias said, glancing around the room. "I can see why you are so proud of it." Lyra smiled softly. "Pride is important, yes, but sometimes it can also blind us. We have been a warrior race for centuries, and we've always believed that strength is the only thing that matters. But now, now I'm not so sure." Elias raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Lyra hesitated. She had never spoken about her doubts to anyone, not even her closest advisors. But there was something about Elias, something that made her feel comfortable enough to open up. "For years, I have ruled as a queen, always putting my people first. But in doing so, I have neglected the other parts of myself. I've shut myself off from emotions, from love. I've believed that I could lead without letting my heart get involved." She paused, taking a deep breath. "But now, I'm not so sure that's the right way." Elias looked at her thoughtfully. "It's difficult, isn't it, to balance duty with feelings? But maybe you don't have to choose one over the other. Maybe you can have both." Lyra shook her head. "I don't know how. My whole life has been about duty. I was trained to be strong, to put my people above all else. But now that you're here, I don't know if I can keep doing it the way I always have." Elias stepped closer, his voice soft and reassuring. "Maybe it's not about doing it the way you always have. Maybe it's about learning a new way. A way that lets you still be the leader your people need, but also allows you to be human, to have your own dreams, your own hopes." Lyra felt something shift inside her, something she had long buried. It was a feeling she couldn't quite name, but it made her chest tighten. She had always prided herself on her ability to stay focused, to keep her emotions in check. But Elias's words stirred something deep inside her, something she had not felt in years. "I don't know if I can do that," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can change." Elias smiled gently, his blue eyes meeting hers. "Change isn't easy, but it's the only way to grow. You don't have to do it all at once. Take it one step at a time. I'll be here every step of the way to help you." For the first time since their marriage had been arranged, Lyra felt a small sense of peace. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know what the future would bring, but in that moment she knew one thing. For sure, she wasn't alone. In the following days, their relationship began to change. It wasn't just about the political alliance anymore. It became something deeper, something more personal. Lyra began to see Elias not just as a political tool, but as an individual, someone who cared for her, who respected her, and who didn't see her as just a queen, but as a person. One afternoon, they sat together on the balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Elias was speaking about Earth, telling Lyra about his life before the war, about his family and the struggles he had faced growing up. His words were simple, but they revealed a side of him that Lyra hadn't seen before: his vulnerability, his humanity. "I grew up in a small town," Elias said, his voice thoughtful. "We didn't have much, but we had each other. My parents taught me that strength isn't just about fighting. It's about standing by the people you care about, no matter what." Lyra listened intently, her gaze fixed on him. She had always believed that strength meant standing alone, that a leader must carry the weight of the world without leaning on others. But Elias's words made her think differently. Maybe strength wasn't about standing alone. Maybe it was about finding support in those around you. "I don't know if I understand it all yet," Lyra said, her voice soft. "But I think I'm starting to see what you mean." Elias smiled warmly, his eyes meeting hers. "It's all about finding balance and learning to trust." Lyra smiled back, feeling something stir inside her: warmth, a sense of hope. She still had much to learn, but for the first time she felt like she was on the right path. Maybe this marriage, this strange union between two very different worlds, could be the beginning of something new. Something that would change not just her life, but the future of her people as well. It had been weeks since Elias had arrived on Karan, and life in the palace had begun to shift in small but undeniable ways. Queen Lyra found herself thinking more and more about the human soldier, his words, his actions, and his unwavering kindness. Elias had been nothing but respectful, treating her not just as a queen, but as a person. He had done more than honor his duties. He had become a source of quiet strength for her. But despite their growing connection, Lyra still struggled with her feelings. She had always known that her duty was to her people, to the Karan, and she had always put them first. Now, with Elias by her side, she was faced with a dilemma that she had never imagined. Could she continue to lead her people the way she had been taught, with a heart locked away behind walls of duty, or would she allow herself to feel something more? One evening, after a long day of discussions with the council and her advisors, Lyra found herself in her private chambers, staring out at the stars. The night was calm, the air cool, and the soft glow of the palace lights flickered against the dark sky. She couldn't help but feel a sense of longing, a yearning for something she couldn't quite name. She had always been strong, always carried the weight of her position with dignity and pride. But now her emotions were stirring in ways she didn't fully understand. Elias had shown her a side of herself she had long buried. He had made her question everything she had once believed about strength and leadership. And though she didn't want to admit it, she found herself wanting more. The door to her chambers opened quietly, and Elias stepped inside, his presence a comforting familiarity. He had become a regular part of her life, not just as her future husband, but as someone she trusted, someone who cared. "I thought I'd find you here," Elias said, his voice soft. He stepped closer to her, his eyes searching hers. "You've been quiet lately? Is everything all right?" Lyra turned to face him, her heart racing. She hadn't realized how much she had been holding in until now. The weight of the questions that had been swirling in her mind suddenly felt too much to bear. "I'm not sure," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I'm feeling anymore. I thought I had it all figured out, but now I don't know what to think or how to act." Elias looked at her with concern, his expression softening. "You don't have to have everything figured out right away. You don't have to carry the weight of all this alone." Lyra's chest tightened at his words. She had spent so long thinking that she had to carry everything on her own, that her role as queen required her to be unyielding. She had never let anyone in, never allowed herself to be vulnerable, not even with her closest advisors. But with Elias, it was different. He made her feel safe in a way she had never known. "I've spent my whole life focused on duty," Lyra said, her voice shaky. "I was trained to be strong, to make decisions without hesitation. But now I'm not so sure. I've been so focused on my people, my responsibilities, that I've never allowed myself to feel anything else. But now I'm not sure I can keep doing it this way. Elias reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. Lyra, you don't have to do everything alone. I'm here. I believe in you. I believe in the leader you are and the person you can be. You don't have to sacrifice everything for your people. You don't have to give up who you are to be a good queen. Tears welled up in Lyra's eyes as Elias spoke. She had always believed that to be a good leader, she had to hide her emotions, keep them buried deep inside. But now, with Ilias's words, something inside her began to crack. She felt the walls she had built around her heart start to crumble. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to feel the weight of her own emotions. I've been so afraid, she said, her voice breaking, afraid of showing weakness, afraid of being vulnerable. I've always believed that if I let my guard down, I would fail. But now, with you here, I'm not so sure anymore. Ilias's eyes softened as he stepped closer to her, his hand still on her shoulder. It's okay to be afraid, Lyra. We all are. But it doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And being human means allowing yourself to feel, to love, and to trust. Lyra looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. She had always thought that strength meant being unshakable, unmovable. But now, Elias was showing her that true strength wasn't about hiding her feelings. It was about being honest, about embracing her humanity, and about trusting the people around her. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, she whispered. I've spent so long keeping my emotions in check, building walls around my heart. But now I don't know if I can keep living like this. You don't have to have it all figured out, Elias said softly. You just need to take one step at a time. I'll be here with you every step of the way. Lyra's tears finally fell, but they were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of release, of acceptance. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to feel the weight of everything she had been carrying, and for the first time, she felt a sense of peace. Elias stepped closer and gently cupped her face in his hands, his touch warm and reassuring. You don't have to be perfect, Lyra. You don't have to do it all alone. You have me. You have your people. And together we'll find a way. Lyra closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the comfort of his words. She had spent so long pushing people away, believing that strength came from isolation. But now, she saw that true strength came from connection, from trust, and from love. In that moment, Lyra made a decision. She would no longer carry the weight of the world on her shoulders alone. She would allow herself to trust, to love, and to be vulnerable. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but with Elias by her side, she knew that she could face whatever the future held, and for the first time in a long time, Lyra smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. It was a smile of hope, of possibility, and of a future that was no longer defined by duty alone. The days passed in a blur for Queen Lyra and Elias. The bond between them had deepened, and although their marriage was still largely a political alliance, it was beginning to take on a life of its own. Lyra found herself thinking of Elias more, and more not just as her husband, but as someone she could rely on, someone she could trust. They spent more time together, talking about their pasts, their hopes, and their dreams. Elias shared stories of his life on Earth, of growing up in a small town where every person mattered. He spoke of his family, of the bonds that held them together through tough times. Lyra listened carefully, absorbing his words with a kind of quiet wonder. Her own life had been so different. She had always been surrounded by duty, by expectation. Her upbringing had taught her that emotions were something to control, not embrace. But with Elias, she had begun to see things differently. He had shown her that being human didn't mean abandoning responsibility. It meant understanding that strength could also come from compassion, from connection, from shared experiences. Lyra knew she had a long way to go before she could fully embrace this new way of thinking. Her heart slowly began to crumble. And as they worked together to plan their future, Lyra couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to live in a world where love, not just duty, could be the guiding force. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting a warm golden light across the palace gardens. Lyra found herself sitting on the balcony with Elias. The air was cool, the sky painted with hues of orange and purple. They sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the peace of the evening. Elias was the first to break the silence. "Lyra," he said softly, his voice calm and steady. "I've been thinking." Lyra turned her head to look at him, her curiosity piqued. "About what?" "About us," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "About the future. About what we can do together." Lyra felt her heart skip a beat. They had talked about the future before, but it had always been in terms of their roles as leaders, as symbols of two worlds coming together. This was different. Elias was talking about a future built on something more than just politics. He was talking about a life together. "I've been thinking the same," Lyra replied, her voice soft. "I never imagined that this marriage could be more than just a contract, but now I see that it's become something more. Something real." Elias smiled gently, his eyes warm with understanding. "I've never believed in the idea of a perfect marriage, but I do believe in the idea of working together, growing together. I know we come from different worlds, but I think we have something here, something worth fighting for." Lyra felt a wave of emotion rush over her, and for a moment she was speechless. She had always thought that she was destined to lead her people alone, to carry the weight of the crown without the support of anyone else. But now, with Elias beside her, she was beginning to see a different path. A path where love and duty could exist side by side. "I'm not sure what the future holds," Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I know that with you I don't have to face it alone." Elias reached out and took her hand in his touch gentle and reassuring. "You don't have to face anything alone, Lyra. We'll figure it out together. I'm here for you, no matter what." Lyra squeezed his hand, feeling a sense of peace settle in her heart. She had always thought that love was something to be feared, something that could distract her from her duties as queen. But now, she realized that love wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. And it was a strength that could help her become the leader she had always wanted to be, one who could lead with compassion, with understanding, and with the support of those she cared about. "I think we can build something wonderful," Lyra said softly, her voice filled with conviction. "Something that's not just about politics or alliances, but about our people. We can show them that strength comes from unity, from understanding. We can build a future where both our worlds thrive." Elias nodded, his expression serious, but filled with hope. "I agree. We have a chance to do something truly special, not just for us, but for everyone." Lyra looked out at the horizon, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream about a future where she didn't have to choose between duty and love, where she could be both a queen and a person, where she could lead with her heart as well as her mind. As the night settled in around them, Lyra leaned her head on Ilias's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence beside her. She had spent so much of her life alone, believing that her path was one she had to walk by herself. But now, with Elias by her side, she felt like she had found a partner, someone who would help her shoulder the burdens of leadership. For the first time, Lyra felt hopeful. The future was uncertain, and there would be challenges ahead. But she knew that, together, they could face anything. She had always believed that strength came from within. But now, she understood that true strength came from those you trusted, from those you loved. With Elias beside her, she felt ready to face whatever the future held. "You're right," Lyra said, lifting her head and meeting Elias's gaze. "Together, we can build a future no one ever imagined. For us, for our people, for both our worlds." Elias smiled, his eyes filled with pride and determination. "Then let's make it happen." As they sat together, the stars above them shining brightly, Lyra felt a sense of peace and contentment that she had never known before. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Elias by her side, and together, they would build something greater than either of them could have imagined on their own. A future where love, trust, and unity would lead the way.